and you can't tell, but my hands are really far apart. So if you're
you're hitting Patrick and Derek in the head right now.
Yeah, gosh.
They had it coming.
Shorter.
Oh my
pads,
God, that they both
shorter
moved their heads in
pads.
exactly the right way for my view. That was
Todd.
fantastic. Welcome everybody. It's Ask Sympraxis, February 18th, 2026. Today we're doing SharePoint sites as a unit of work, talking through the pros and cons. We do not have Mark Anderson today, unfortunately, but the rest of the gang is all here. Happy to have everybody. Thank you for joining us. And so, as I said, today we're going to talk about SharePoint sites as a unit of work, the pros and cons between those. We're going to start off by defining what we mean by a unit of work. And then we'll bring back, which we haven't done in a while, the maturity model slide. So that's coming back. And then we're going to talk about the pros and cons and then break them out into their subsections of security, limits, file access, lifecycle management, and Todd's favorite, administrative concerns.
Very somber, very serious.
I was going to say we have special music queued up for that one.
Yeah, lots and lots of Todd content today for all of you Todd fans. So let's move right in. Patrick, can you help get us started with defining what we mean by unit of work?
Sure thing. So, in short, a unit of work is kind of what we do on a day-to-day basis. They are, for us, projects, working with our clients. A project is a unit of work. If you're a law firm, that might be a case. If you're a property company or a property manager, it might be a property or the house or unit that you're talking about. You could get in a little bit further down. It could be, a grant if you are someone who deals with grants, a nonprofit, or a campaign if you're a politician, let's say, or maybe you're an ad company. It could be a campaign there as well, I guess. But generally speaking, it's separate containers of content which can be managed through a lifecycle alone. So it's got a beginning, middle, and end. It's kind of obviously full of different components, but it's kind of how that all comes together in one piece. Now, what isn't a unit of work, but could be part of a unit of work, are things like your employee onboarding, your hiring and recruiting processes, performance reviews. These are all things that happen within your department, but don't necessarily make up a unit of work. It's just something that happens, actually most of those on a human resource site, say. So your human resource site would be your body of work, and your onboarding, hiring, your performance reviews might be part of that unit of work. That's kind of what we were thinking there. Does anyone else have anything to add?
I don't think so. I think that's a good summary.
I think you nailed it. Yep.
So when it comes to the maturity model, oh, sorry.
No,
go ahead. Introduce that too?
Nope. I was just going to say, go ahead and dive into the maturity model aspect of it.
So when it comes to the maturity model, obviously, like most units of work, you can reach this in different ways. A lot of our clients come in at around a 100, which is where you have a unit of work that contains folders and different sites. So say you have, a project that touches engineering and finance and accounting and project management. Well, maybe each of those departments have their own team sites and their work is in those own team sites. So as someone coming in wants to know what's going on with the project, you have to reach out to each department to find where that information is located. So they have some organization, but it's very functional for the department, not necessarily thought of as being accessible to anyone who needs access to it in that unit of work. 200 maturing organizations and teams. Some units of work are individual sites. So maybe you have a project site for new projects, but some of the ongoing ones are still in the old approach. So you have to figure out how to manage, different ways of moving forward with that. Where we try to at least get our clients to would be an established organization, level 300. This means that, if you have projects, each unit of work or project has its own site. Each department has maybe a folder or a channel within a team, or there's one location where anything related to that unit of work is housed. So you can kind of better track it and everyone has access to what they need. Certainly, as we move up to 400, older unit of work sites are managed through their life cycles, whether that's manual or maybe we're starting to add in some sort of automation to some of these. So it's taking it from creation through archiving. We're talking about retention policies and different things like that. And then, of course, the best of the best, once they're ready up there. Not sure I would say best in breed. I'm not sure where that came from, Mark Anderson.
That's the definition of 500. Is sort of the
from
best
the
in breed.
It's from the dog show.
Yeah.
That would be the mutt at the top.
As I say, I'm 100 to 300 mostly. I haven't worked on those bunch, but that's where everything is more streamlined and automated in the business process.
Absolutely. We should probably address, there was a question in the chat around whether we mean team sites or communication sites. And I think that's been going back and forth. And so I just want to clarify and say it depends entirely on what that unit of work is and what the needs are and what the appetite is for the client in question. In general, I think we almost always use team sites for this in a more mature organization that's using Microsoft Teams, because they would want to have access to the information that's in SharePoint through the Teams UI. They would be using both, and therefore a team site is probably the right answer. But there are organizations that don't use Teams at all and are purely in SharePoint. So yes, you could use a non-group connected Teams site template, or you could use a communication site template. But if you're not using the Microsoft 365 group, then it's more of a matter of what you want the user experience to be. And so it could be either. But in general, I think we tend to mean a team site. So, all right, let's move on to the pros and cons. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Patrick.
I was just referring back to kind of the first side of what is a unit of work. I think that goes into it. I mean, if it's an intranet, then that is your unit of work, and the intranet is made up of the communication sites, in which case the communication site wouldn't be, it would just be part of it, kind of like I was talking about with the HR. But certainly you are correct that I think a lot of what we talk about is done in Teams and more on the collaboration side of things as opposed to a communication side of things.
Fair. Yes, very fair. I was more thinking of things that we would break out into like projects type sites. So that's a very fair addition to the definition. All right, Mark Cashman, pros and cons of this site architecture.
So this is really just to frame up a bunch of the team to go deeper into a lot of different areas when you think of units of work and things you should think about that might lead into how the maturity model prescribes. One of the things that's kind of baked into the maturity model is as you get more mature, you might consider doing things more in an automated fashion. So automation also leads into prescribing what is the life cycle of the content? What are the people doing at different points in time in the project, and how easy is it to move from various states? And that might be level of access, few people working on a draft of a thing, moving into more people being exposed and pulled in to review and approve and work on other elements, and all the way through to closing down and ultimately archiving it. So life cycle is important. We'll go into that a little bit more deeply. And from a site perspective, you'll hear us probably lean into and say, moving a site with all the things inside of it and who has permission to it, that's a unit of work that's easy to work with. Security goes right along with that. Who you permission to get into that work, to do the project or not to do the project, or not to be able to see it, is super important. And that applies to everything about the project. And if you've got it sporadic all over the place or not in a very well-contained unit of work, that becomes challenging, especially when you start to involve people who are either outside of your group or even outside of your company with guests. Some of the cons are just how you access those files. We've learned this one kind of real time recently, where the one big hurdle was if I start distributing across multiple sites, I have a harder time on my desktop getting to those files when I just need certain files from certain sites or certain whatever the project was about. In that case, it was about individuals that they're hiring and what about them. Another con is just general limits. There have been lots of noise, throughout the history of SharePoint around increasing limits and what is the limit, and if you've hit the limit, what happens, but being cautious about those limits. We got a nice deep dive to go through that. And then the last one is kind of the same with the files treatment. Is if you have a lot of sites, there's a user navigation element to it, and that's probably on the higher side of the maturities. If you've got a lot of these units of work, how do you organize them, not just through the life cycle, but access throughout the life cycle of whatever the status is. So navigation certainly becomes a hurdle when you've got more things, but if you do it right, then having more things with good navigation isn't a hurdle, isn't a challenge. But we'll leave it there because we're going to go deeper into all of them, but hopefully starts to a little bit more understand from the maturity model with units of work and some of the things that you should weigh in terms of what unit of work should you choose. So let's get into it.
Awesome. Life cycle, start there. Mark?
Oh, is that me? I thought this was somebody
else.
It is. I thought it was somebody else.
Yep. No.
Sorry. I thought it had a little C on it. Those C marks are like, the ghost of Mark. All right, sorry.
Game.
No, I love Lifecycle is one of my favorite things that I honestly am learning to do more, not just to be aware of. Because it's really important to ask the questions of what is your business process and who is involved and what do you need to do at the different stages. And oftentimes it starts to involve multiple units of work because you've got where we do our drafts, that might be a team site, and to the conversation in the chat, where we publish maybe is a communication site. Similar unit of work because it's the same project or campaign or business process, but the unit of work where we find things, we might create them in one location and move them to another, or just to build this slide out, where you create and start to change status might just be on the unit of work to say this project or this person or this campaign is currently active. So do X or Y with it in the context of being aware of that. So yep, that's good information that I found. It says it's active. Let's go. If I find something that's inactive or has been archived, it might be useful to me, but I should be with caution not to just post this out on the internet on LinkedIn because I found it in the archives. So lifecycle is pretty important in terms of how you define it, how you move the unit of work through it, and some of that's labeling, some of that's actual move of content or limiting of permissions. And at some point, if it becomes a storage issue, like you'll hear later, how you start to build that into your archive process, which could be for backup and restores at the bottom, but also could just be purely to save cost on storage. Put it in somewhere that's cheaper, but not too far away to access it, and also to repurpose it, whether that's restoration or just, I guess from a template perspective, or another similar something came about and you've done it before, might as well restore it and repurpose if you can. So that's the way that Mark Anderson would have said it. Now, the way that I say it is...
Let's give it a shout out to Orchestra here because I think they play a big role in a lot of the lifecycle management solutions that we help implement. So definitely a shout out to them as a partner, especially in the archive. I mean, they have an archive piece to their product, but they also support Microsoft's archive strategies. But also because of the automation that they help provide, you're given to be able to do sort of any kind of archiving strategy you might want to do, whether that's maybe moving things out of Microsoft 365 entirely and moving into Azure or some other cloud storage, or even SAN storage type network storage. If you have that locally, you could be doing those types of things. So I think having a tool and having a philosophy for lifecycle management really helps with those things like what Mark Crispin was saying about, the number of site quotas and the number of site collections and how that affects your quota. And, we've seen a little chatter on LinkedIn lately about storage and the amount of resources you have for storage based on the amount of licensing you have and whether that's enough or not enough. I think lifecycle management is the thing that people need to start adopting to sort of address those issues going forward. So, all right, let us move on to Derek. And there's no other Derek-like person, so this is you, Derek Cash Peterson. File access.
Wonderful. So, file access, if we go back to like the old days, right? And you look, I say old days, but like you think about like a legacy file share, right? That's very simple. It's one location. You can sort of go in, you've got your nested tree structure. Obviously, this is not that, but one of the things that makes this accessing the files a lot easier is the synchronization of OneDrive. And I say sync to OneDrive, shortcut to OneDrive. I still say sync. When you create a shortcut to OneDrive, what that is going to do is it's going to add, obviously, a shortcut to your OneDrive. But then when you have it synchronized to your desktop, you've got instant access to those files in a location that is specific. Now, you can do super cool things like rearrange the files. The shortcuts. I had a field day when I found out. That was like life-changing to me when I found that out. I like went and spent 2 hours like renaming all the different folders and putting them in organization structure that actually worked for me. But the thing that I really, really like to do with these is, or not really, but it makes sense when I'm trying to do it, is if I get an attachment from a client and I need to save it somewhere, it provides a space on my computer that I can save that to that's automatically synchronized back up to Teams. Or if I'm taking an export from ShareGate, for instance, and I need to save that file somewhere, well, where am I saving it? I'm saving it to my OneDrive, which is then syncing back up to the cloud. And so that makes it a whole lot easier to manage the files, to work with the files, and to sort of make it a little bit more streamlined for your end users. And the other super cool thing that we just recently learned is that these can be done programmatically. Julie, do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think this is maybe a game changer, especially if you're doing lifecycle management. The idea that as part of your lifecycle management strategy, you could have an automation process that helps users get their shortcuts to OneDrive put into their local OneDrive so that they have access to the sites and the libraries that they need access to based on the work that they're working on. This could be a really interesting paradigm shift for that usual pro and con that we get a lot talking to clients. I think they can maybe see the benefits of site architecture for their units of work, but where the almost always the one that keeps them from doing it is that accessibility for people for their files. I mean, it's definitely one of my biggest hurdles personally. I need to be able to get to my client files. I'm working with multiple clients. I want to have those in OneDrive so that when I open up any of my Office desktop clients, I can get to the files that I need to get to. And so I can absolutely feel and sympathize with that pain. And I think this can be a way that you can mitigate that pain to get all the other benefits that you might get out of site architecture, which are many and varied, in my opinion. So, all right, let us move on to security. And now we start the Todd show. Go ahead, Todd.
The funnest part of the entire show. Yes.
We finally gave a session where Todd gets lots of slides. So go ahead, Todd. I'm here for it.
I'm basking in my my key lights and all that.
Yeah, you should be.
So one of the biggest benefits as an administrator is to having units of work and having lots of sites and scaling by site is security. And can't hit this one hard enough. I've been working with SharePoint for a long time, and for the entire time I've been working with SharePoint, the site has been the security boundary. That's where ownership has been defined. That's where templates have been defined, things like that. And so as you're planning out and as you're looking at your SharePoint tenant, you should keep that in mind that Microsoft has designed this product with the site to be the security boundary. And that'll make things a lot happier for you. So there are some limits to unique permissions inside of a document library, inside of a site. I'm going to cover that in the next slide in more detail. But that's something to keep in mind when it comes to security, is how well you can try to partition those security things up. If you've got one big document library, you're trying to slice your partitions, your permissions very discreetly. Know that there's a limit there. It seems like a huge limit, but we've actually had a client hit that limit. So it is something that can be done. There are a whole lot of security settings that are set at the site level, and they really, once you start playing with them, help you keep your content more secure. Things like your external sharing settings, like can any of this content be shared externally? Yes or no? That's a site level decision. And so if everything's in one document library, or everything's in one site, that decision covers everything. And so think about your organization and all of the content that you have inside of SharePoint. Do you want your confidential HR documents to fall under the same security decisions as your marketing brochures? Probably not. You don't want to be sharing externally your HR stuff, but your marketing brochures, maybe so. So be aware of that. Things like expiration of guest access, so that thing where the guest links will expire after so many days. I really like that. You don't have these links hanging out there and people having access to stuff months and years after you shared it with them. That's something that you can set at the site level. So that I've got a screenshot there of some stuff. So sensitivity labels, Igor mentioned that. That's another good one. Conditional access. This is one of those really deep admin things that I had to bring up because it's kind of fun. This is actually an Entra ID thing, but this is the idea that at the site level, you can define somebody who accesses this must come from a certain IP range or other specific things. So you can really make things secure. Again, that's set at the site level. And then sensitivity labels. Another thing that I wanted to bring up, kind of based on the chat that we were having in the chat here, was about teams. And also think about if you have a team chat behind a site. If you have one big site, everybody's going to be in that. And if there's any chatting going on, it's going to be, everybody's going to see it. But if you've got individual sites, now your chats are siloed. And I kind of like that. Then the chats are just going to be about the specific things you're talking about.
Well, it certainly helps with cognition, right? Like, even if it's not a security issue, just the ability to, we do this to ourselves at Sympraxis all the damn time. We've got one water cooler chat, and the number of threads going on in that chat is crazy. So, I mean, I think, luckily that's sort of a bin of just general conversations, and it's really not about work. We do manage to, not be the cobbler's kids and silo our conversations about actual client work in team sites. But yeah, if you're trying to have conversations about multiple units of work going on all in one sort of chat surface, can be crazy to manage for everyone.
Yep. All right.
Did you have more to add on this slide?
Nope.
I think I want to give another shout out to automation. It's technically an orchestra shout out as well. But one of the things that's a little bit tricky about, and we talked about it in another show, so I won't go too deep, but and it's right on the screen right now. It's like the tenant, the sharing and permissions and external sharing permissions and guest access and all that stuff. You can say, make it the same by default, have it be the same as the tenant. And so there's settings that the user gets when they create the site, if you're allowing self-creation of sites, and then things that people have to go back and change later. And I don't think that's happening most of the time. And so where an automation sort of more maturity type execution really comes into play is deciding what you want your security settings to be based on the template that is being, utilized. And by template, I don't mean Microsoft template. I mean your own internal templates. Like, is this a private thing? Is this something that's just for general use? What is it? And what do we want our standard governance to be for our permissions for those things, our security settings for those things? And being able to sort of automate that, where this is where, I'll lean into the orchestra way of being able to set those settings on your template and then have that show up every time. That's a great add. So just pointing that out. All right, Todd, limit. This is one that can just get fun. The conversation can get fun on limits. Go ahead.
Yeah. So when we are talking to clients and they've got, we're trying to work them through this unit of work discussion scale by site, generally they're all in one document library. But I did want to bring up some of the site limits because we've got a couple of clients that are threatening to bump up against those. At the site level, we have a hard limit of 2,000 lists and libraries per site. which again seems ridiculous. Like it seems like nobody would ever bump up against that. But we have a client that is scaling by document library, and they're scaling by person by document library. And so while that seems like right now they don't have very many, now start thinking about years of turnover and different people taking roles and things like that. Not only do you potentially come up against the 2,000 limit, but then just think about moving that as people leave the company. You have to move data between document libraries, and that just seems like a bad idea. So keep that in mind. And then another thing is that a URL inside of SharePoint can't be more than 400 characters. So if you've got everything in one site, in one document library, potentially you've got bunches nested of folders, things like that. And so that all adds to the URL. And you can't tell, but my hands are really far apart. So if you're
hitting Patrick and Derek in the head right now.
Yeah. Gosh.
They had it coming.
Shorter.
Oh my God, that they both moved their heads in exactly the right way from my view. That's fantastic.
And so Mark Chrisman is asking.
That's an HR violation.
Mark Chrisman is asking if that includes encoded characters. That includes everything. So you got to be careful with that. And that's one of those things where you're not going to feel that until you're after you've been into this, scaling by folders or whatever for years, and then you run up against that. And so then you have to try to fix that after the fact, and you don't want to be in that position. Couple minutes left to talk about unique permissions. We've got one client that actually bumped up against the 50,000 unique permissions and had to unravel this massive site collection, or this massive document library, into multiple site collections, and you don't want to run up against that. Another thing about that is keep in mind that every sharing link that you makes another security unique permission. So if you do a lot of sharing, that runs up against that. And while you can have 50,000, the recommended number is 5,000. So again, that's one of those things, that's how Microsoft is designing the platform, is around 5,000. It can eke out 50,000, but you don't want to be the ones that run up against that. You can only have 30 million items in a listed library. And again, that seems like a bunch, like you'll never hit that, but just know that after 100,000, things get tough to manage. You have to start having views and manage metadata and all these other things to make that manageable. List view threshold, that's one of those things where, the whole SharePoint can't handle more than 5,000 items. It can, but the list view starts struggling once you get more than 5,000. API throttling, if you write any automation, if you've got everything in one document library, it's going to bring back all, 500,000 items or whatever, and that's just going to slow things down. You're going to get throttled.
Well, you have to do paging. You have to do paging for that. But yes, you're absolutely right. It makes it much more difficult. 100%. Yeah,
you can't just download a script off my blog and run it, because it's not going to have all the paging stuff built in.
Yeah, 100%.
And you may want different version settings. Go ahead, hit me with the next slide here. We're running out of time. So we get a lot of pushback from SharePoint administrators on this when we say you should be making tons and tons of sites for everybody. You get a site. And I'm saying that this is actually a good thing for SharePoint administrators. The first one is everything on that security slide. So everything is more secure when you scale by site collection or site. So keep all those in mind. Storage has come up a bunch in the chat and in our discussions. I like being able to go into the admin center and sort by size and see who my large sites are. As I see my tenants starting to run out of space, the admin center is great. Sort by size. I can see who's using a lot. I can start having discussions with them about archiving data. If you have everything inside of one document library, it becomes trickier to do that. You can do it with the store man page, but it's not as easy as just sorting by size. Also, Mark Cashman talked about site lifecycle. That's something that you can do very easily if you have lots of sites. If you scale that way, if you scale by folder or by document library, the life cycle becomes tougher. At the bottom of this slide, I've just got some questions that people ask and the answers that I give them. If people are worried about having too many sites to keep their heads around, the admin center handles it. The admin center has been built for SharePoint to handle 2 million sites. And so, again, I wouldn't recommend that, but again, that's how Microsoft envisions the platform. The admin center, you can sort, you can filter, you can do all kinds of things. And then you also have automation tools, PowerShell, the M365 CLI. They all can loop through things well. They all connect to specific sites very well. So you've got a lot of options there. Hard to govern. I would say it's easier to govern because it's easier to make sure that your content has exactly the policy you want. We're talking retention policy, sensitivity labels, any of that kind of thing. If you have scale by site, you can do that more easily. And then harder to automate. I would argue that it's easier to automate. You don't have to loop through hundreds of thousands of things. You're going specifically to the thing that you want to go to. I think it's a better story all the way around.
Yep, all of those things completely agree with. And there we are, Todd and I agreeing. Love it. Yay!
Aww.
So here's some links that we have. There's a lot of chatter going on, and I have not been able to keep it up.
I haven't either.
But we'll answer things as we get off after this. But coming up on March 4th, the SharePoint 25th anniversary is happening. If you did not see it posted on LinkedIn, there is so many posts that are going out right now about that SharePoint anniversary. And there's also a hackathon happening for the SharePoint 25th anniversary. So we're going to cover the SharePoint 25th anniversary and what's going on with that on our March 4th episode. In the meantime, join us live. We will be at the Microsoft 365 Community Conference. That's in Orlando. That's in towards the end of April, school vacation week for many, many people. And we have a discount code there for Sympraxis, so a bunch of us will be there. And then after that, the European Collaboration Summit, that's in Cologne, Germany this year, and a bunch of us will be over there. So, and we also have a discount code for that. So if you'd like to join us there, that would be lovely. So anyway, come see us at one of these events, and otherwise we will see you on March 4th for SharePoint 25th anniversary show. Thanks everybody. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you so much for joining us this week on Ask Sympraxis. We love getting your questions or session ideas. You can submit by using the link in About. If you find this helpful, hit that like or subscribe button and share this content with your colleagues.